Senior consulting editor Srinjoy Chaudhary on the broadcast with us. Srinjoy, India is making all the right noises in the meeting, and the Quad leaders also echoing what the Prime Minister has been saying, whether it is about China and its territorial aggression, whether it is cross-border terrorism or the situation in Ukraine.
Undoubtedly, the Prime Minister made serious points on all the issues. You heard the Prime Minister speak. He said that as far as this war in the Ukraine is concerned, it's about humanity and human values. These are very strong points made. And he continued to say that, yes, India will provide humanitarian assistance to the Ukraine. That's a point that he made again. So it was a good meeting. Actually, it has been a string of good meetings as far as Prime Minister Modi is concerned. He had a good meeting with every world leader he met. And it has to be said that he is leaving the G7 today a very sort of satisfied person, because all India's contributions to the G7 have been very positive. India has spoken about the economic issues, particularly relating to the global south, and in the context of the Ukraine war, when the prices of food have escalated, as have the prices of fuel and also fertilizer. This has affected many small countries, particularly of the global south. Prime Minister has spoken about them, spoken on behalf of them. That's very important. Prime Minister has also spoken about climate change. Prime Minister has spoken about the war in the Ukraine. It has to end. There has to be diplomatic dialogue. There has to be negotiations. This is India's point of view. And he looked at the war, as he told the Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, from a human aspect, from the aspect of humanity. Now, that's very important. And this is something that will be remembered by the Ukrainian side. Everything said, it has been a very good visit to Hiroshima. He has also said the right things, as you rightly said, about nuclear disarmament, particularly in Hiroshima, a city that was so badly affected by that one nuclear bomb that fell on Hiroshima in August 1945. It has to be remembered that it was one bomb that created so much devastation, and a bomb called Little Boy. So as a result, nuclear disarmament is an absolute key. And India has always spoken about nuclear disarmament, and Narendra Modi, Prime Minister of India, continues to do so.
Absolutely. And, Times Now is the only channel that's reporting from Hiroshima. I request you to stay on with us as the Prime Minister continues to be in Japan. He also visited the memorial in Hiroshima earlier and paid tributes to the blast victims. He also held bilaterals with Rishi Sunak and the Brazilian president. Let's take in a word from my colleague, Times Now correspondent Arpit Jain, who is joining us from Hiroshima. First of all, of course, want to ask you the significance of Prime Minister Modi's visit to Hiroshima Peace Memorial.
I think it signifies the peace which they are trying to establish in the region. As we know, the summit is happening in Hiroshima, with yesterday also the bust of Mahatma Gandhi being unveiled over there. I think the symbol of basically devoting flowers at that particular spot signifies a lot of things. The most important thing is to signify the importance and the need of peace in the region, not only in Asia, but also in Europe and also the America region.
Right. But also talking about Prime Minister Modi's visit at the G7, as we've been talking about it, the Prime Minister has also been talking about these issues, the global issues, and the global leaders also echoing the same sentiment.
I think India's significance can be justified by the fact that India, despite not being part of the G7 countries, still India being called at the world stage as a major member to be part of this summit. The fact the warmth with which Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Joe Biden from the United States met, the way the Japanese counterparts treated Prime Minister Narendra Modi in Japan, signifies the fact that India, despite it not be in the formal terms being part of the G7 summit, still it's a very major player in terms of the world economics, in terms of world peace, and ensuring world stability.
Okay, let's also talk about, the G7 invitation to India and what is the significance that has.
Absolutely. as we know that India has always had the stance that we will not raise our arms first. The fact that a nuclear de-armament treaty has basically been discussed over here, the fact that they are all calling for world peace by letting go of the use of nuclear weapons, this is a big indication to the fact that no country wants the other country or any of the countries in the world to basically engage in nuclear warfare even remotely.
All right, let's also go across to former ambassador joining us on the broadcast, Achal Malhotra. But before that, of course, talking about the significance of this meeting, as we've been talking about it, the Prime Minister has also spoken about the Ukraine war. In fact, we just played out that interaction that he had as well with Zelensky.
I would like to add one more thing to the fact that Japan, being the only country which has seen the nuclear disaster which happened here during the World War II, people in Japan, especially the older people, are very, very hesitant of getting into a situation where there's nuclear warfare again in any part of the world. They are very scared, they are very careful about the situation never ever happening in any part of the world again. I think this is also one of the main reasons why this summit is happening in Hiroshima in Japan.
Okay, all right. Arpit, thank you for joining us on the broadcast. Let me go back to Srinjoy Chaudhary on that. Srinjoy, of course, you know, we've been talking about what are the highlights of this meeting. What would you say is the key takeaway? Of course, on various issues, very key points. The Prime Minister has spoken about it. We just played out those interactions as well. But what would you say was the key takeaway from these meetings?
Well, very, very importantly, Prime Minister not only spoke about India, he spoke about the global south, and he represents in some ways the global south, because everything really came together when he did that. When he spoke about the global south, he pointed out what the war had done, what the war in the Ukraine had done. The fact that all these countries, most of these countries are suffering, and they are not suffering because of any other reason but the war, which has led to an escalation in prices of food, of fuel and fertilizer, and it's hurting at least half the world. He was speaking not just about the people of India, he was speaking about half the world, and that's particularly important. The other important issue that Prime Minister spoke about in Quad was that Quad was actually for the good of the world, and not just in terms of the military issues at all. Yes, the Quad wants open pathways in the East China Sea and so on. But beyond that, the fact that the Quad is there when vaccines are required by people all over the world. The Quad is there to fight climate change. The Quad is there to increase economic connectivity and ensure that things get better despite all these problems. So all these issues came up in the Quad, and the Prime Minister spoke very, very well on all these issues. So it is a clear sign of India's presence as a world power in Hiroshima. The fact that it's not just that India was invited, India has been invited in the past, but India's presence today as the world's most popular nation, as a country that is going to become a $5 trillion economy, as a country that has a strong and sensible military, a country that is an important political element as far as the world is concerned. All of these things came together in Hiroshima.
Okay, all right. Stay on with us. We also have Anil Raj joining us from Tokyo. Anil, you know, we're talking about the key takeaways. Like Srinjoy was just pointing out, India is not just any participant in these meetings. It's a economy which is reaching $5 trillion, and you know, the kind of statements, the kind of stand that India has taken is also resonating world over.
Thank you, Pratibha. So I think Modi ji's visit to Japan, and especially as a special guest, although we are not part of the G7, is definitely significant for India. So this definitely, being in Japan, I can feel the energy whenever Modi ji comes here. and I can feel the the discussions happening with India, Japan, and the India being in focus. So I think this is a great significant visit of his, and we hope India-Japan relationships can build further from here.
And, like you mentioned, Prime Minister Modi visits any other country across the globe. And, these are similar scenes that are witnessed every single time. The kind of response that we get in from the Indian diaspora is completely unparalleled.
Yes, that's true. I think if I'm correct, Japan is the only place where Modi ji has visited 3 times a year. I think last year or the year before that. So probably that shows the significance that India-Japan plays an important role for India and for the world. And he is definitely taking the world, taking it in the right direction.
Right, taking it in the right direction. And, the kind of popularity that the Prime Minister has across the globe has also been acknowledged by the world leaders. This is something that is mentioned time and again. The top leaders, including whether it is Joe Biden, he has mentioned the fact that, or whether it is the Australian Prime Minister, they've mentioned the fact that the Prime Minister, the kind of popularity that he has with the Indian diaspora becomes extremely difficult for those countries as well to ensure that all those who want to attend can attend this event.
Yes, we being in Japan, we can feel it firsthand. So I think that's pretty good for us, and that's pretty good for India, Japan. And you can see that having a meeting of Zelensky, and that shows the world power, the power that we have, India has right now. And we are at a place where people are looking at us for solutions.
Right. Thank you for joining us. We'll continue coming back to you for those updates. Going back to Srinjoy, while we talk about the popularity of the Prime Minister, the reason why, of course, India's standing is so crucial, like you mentioned, is the fact that India is a growing economy, and this comes at a time when the entire world came to a standstill in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. But India has bounced back well, and how? And more importantly, of course, the stature of Prime Minister Modi as a global leader, which is, very, very clearly visible every single time the Prime Minister visits any of these countries.
Undoubtedly, first of all, India is the fastest growing big economy, and that's a very important factor in the world. Secondly, you rightly said Prime Minister Narendra Modi's personal presence. Now, a lot of people have said that Prime Minister Modi is the one person who can actually, because he has strong links on both sides, can intervene and try and stop the war in the Ukraine. He can bring peace in the Ukraine, along with other leaders, is something that has been spoken about in the past. Now, whether that happens or not, we do not know. We will have to see. But very importantly also, Prime Minister not only spoke about India, a country of 1.4 billion people, a country that is going to be a $5 trillion economy, a country that is an epitome of stability. He also spoke for the global South. He spoke for 600 million people. And that's very important. He didn't speak for just India. He spoke for many, many countries who are affected, very badly affected by the war, and the fact that the West, primarily countries like America, Britain, France, Germany, and later, of course, China and Russia, who are responsible for global warming. The countries that are most affected and will be most affected include India and many other countries in the Pacific. That's been
the focus. I just want to quickly go across to Anil Raj on the significance of the Prime Minister's visit to Hiroshima Peace Memorial, because, we've discussed this as well on the significance of the Prime Minister's visit. This is also the first by an Indian Prime Minister after the Pokhran nuclear test.
Yes, I think it is very significant from a relationship point of view, because Hiroshima is considered to be the peace, a symbol of peace. I think India-Japan relationship, and India is for peace. Whether you look at the Ukraine war, India has been very neutral, and this is very significant for us. And it also shows the relationship between India and Japan.
Okay, all right. And talking about India's stand on nuclear tests as well, how does that play out?
Yeah, India is a peace-loving country. Japan also shares the same values. So I think the nuclear peace treaty is what you call no first use policy has to be followed by India also.
Okay, all right. So the Prime Minister has met the top leaders. We spoke about Joe Biden and also Rishi Sunak. A host of issues have also been discussed. If you can also give us details of the highlights of the meetings and the kind of reception that it has had there.
I think actually gives a lot of what you call takes a lot of energy with him with all his meetings, and I think there are a lot of pending issues between UK and India and US and India. We hope that these kind of meetings and these regular interactions actually will solve a lot of those issues.
Okay, all right. Stay on with us. I also want to introduce Abhishek Pallava, Times Now correspondent, joining us on the broadcast. Because the meeting there has, of course, resonated across the world in the kind of important discussions that have taken place. One of the most crucial takeaways being, of course, calling out the territorial aggression of China.
Yes, it's a very significant statement that it's came out. As we knows that G7 India is not a part of that, but now world has recognized any of the decisions, any of the betterment of the world, India will be the part of play the crucial role. And yesterday the meeting with even the Ukrainian president. It's a different message and meaning that India is setting up a completely different world forum for the world, entire world nations. The kind of as we all knows, the kind of power and the kind of aura that Modi ji carries. It's taking India to the different level. We all knows that this G7. Yesterday we have inaugurated that Mahatma Gandhi statue in the Hiroshima. It has a lot of significance considering the kind of conflicts that or the aggression by China or the Russia and Ukraine war. So this is one of the significant message that India has given to the world, considering Hiroshima, as we all knows that Hiroshima is the place where it was the nuclear bomb and devastation was there. So it's a Modi ji has given, and the world has to the world has given a very, very strong message, and it's that the entire world now understand that they cannot ignore India and plan anything. India will be the part of India will play the vital role always, and it's already proven. Now we are hoping under his leadership and the kind of Indian growth story that we have, we will be leading to the world.
Okay. All right. In fact, the Prime Minister was in Hiroshima, like you mentioned. He unveiled the bust of Mahatma Gandhi. Very, very significant messaging, as well as, of course, meeting the Indian diaspora.